Welcome to Fractional Futures, the essential podcast for CEOs, investors, and senior marketing executives looking to unlock the power of fractional marketing leadership. I'm Paul Mills, your guide on this journey, where me and my special guests uncover how this innovative leadership model is reshaping the business landscape. Whether you're a business leader looking to build a competitive advantage, an investor seeking to enhance the value of your portfolio, or a senior marketing executive considering a fractional career, this podcast is for you. We'll share expert insights, provide actionable strategies, and explore real-world success stories to help you leverage fractional marketing leadership for maximum impact. Tune into Fractional Futures and discover how to revolutionize your business and career. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Fractional Futures, where I'm joined by Dan Gwalter, an executive coach and founder of No Nonsense Leadership. Hi, Dan. How have you been?
Very well, thanks. What about yourself?
Yeah, pretty good. Any interesting stories this week?
It's been, funny enough, a lot of people commenting on guitars. Actually, I have people, after the podcast went out, I have people in my DMs nailing the guitars. So we'll gamify it a little bit. If you can name the yellow guitar in the middle, then as such, I'll even give you a free 30-minute consultation. How about that?
Yeah, well, this is obviously a useless game for those listening on the podcast, but for those watching, they'll probably know I don't know my guitars. I know a Stratocaster, but I don't know my guitars.
I'm not doing any of those.
If you know, do you give them girls' names or anything like that? You know, if it's a girl's name, I'll guess a girl's name, but I don't know what types they are. Are they all electric?
They are all capable of electric. The one already behind my head is an acoustic electric, so it can be played either, but the rest are electric guitars.
Yeah, they do look pretty cool. Anyway, so in our last episode, we sort of discussed how fractional CMOs need to build trust to win long-term clients. And in today's episode, I want to focus on how fractional marketers need to establish a blueprint to win, manage, and I guess retain clients, really. So we'll be covering everything from initial contact to contract. See what you did there? The engagement process, we'll be looking at that. We'll be looking at the effective negotiation techniques and also how to secure that first elusive engagement. So Dan, for marketers, or I guess any executives looking to go down the fractional route, this equally applies. So when making the switch from an in-house role to a fractional role, this is a hugely important part of the jigsaw puzzle, isn't it? What are your thoughts on this before we sort of jump in?
I guess I'm going to go for a direction you probably weren't expecting, which is when people start their sort of fractional consulting business, or consulting business as I would refer to it, there's a massive list of things that you don't actually need, but people seem to get involved in and spin their wheels on for an extended period of time. The things like business cards and logos and websites and all those great things, yeah, they do have a place, but they're not the imperative. You know, if I could give the audience one piece of advice, it's invest your time in the things that are going to generate revenue for you, and then build upon that once you have a revenue stream. Because you know, you can bring a website online if you want. You can go and get business cards created at a point in the future, but neither of those things are going to win you clients on day one. What's your thoughts, Paul?
I didn't take that advice, because when I started DCM, I went straight into I must have a good website, and it needs to be, you know, people need to find my services and stuff like that. So I kind of developed the value proposition, developed the website, optimized the LinkedIn, and then sort of worried about the process, the blueprint, when I started having conversations with prospects. And I think my personal learning was actually that should have been the first thing I do. What is that client journey, and you know, what are the touch points, and then sort of build it out. So that probably jumps nicely actually into this first segment, which is the client engagement process. So when you're coaching execs, what steps do you walk them through when getting them to think about winning and managing clients?
So in the first, just before we begin that, I'm going to give an open disclaimer. I come from a CRM systems background. And what I mean by that is I've implemented CRMs for organizations, whether small scale right the way up to enterprise scale. I've done it for over 10 years in different guises. So a lot of my engagement process is born of those learnings. And so when I'm speaking to people that I'm coaching, my first question is, where are you going to find your clients? Because the wrong answer is, and it's quite a common answer for what it's worth, but the wrong answer is, I'm really good at what I do, therefore clients will find me naturally. I've built a website. I built a website so clients will now find people. They're right, because you're just one of a million other websites out there. So to a certain extent, my leading question is, how are you finding clients? What's your lead generation methodology in the first instance? And certainly I coach, the creation of good quality lead magnets that provide value in exchange for some form of email. There's your first touch point. And I'm coach all the way through the various versions of events that happen through, lead magnets and nurturing into diagnostic offers, from diagnostic offers into retained services. If you could see the whiteboard that is just over my shoulder on that side, my personal end-to-end sales journey is written up there, center step, because that's how I think. I think, well, actually, I've created this lead magnet. It's going to do something. What am I going to? Then the emphasis is on me, right? They've done their bit. Now it's my turn. And so I think about that process very much as a backwards and forwards, where my role is to fulfill my half of the equation whilst guiding the prospect, lead, client on that journey throughout. So the coaching model is very much, let's draw a process. How many touch points does it take before you suggest that actually that individual is no longer a prospect and lead? How many touch points does it take before that lead is ready to become a client? And that certainly gives you good foundations of creating a fairly robust process.
And is there a correct number of steps in that process, or does it depend on the value that's on offer or the service that's on offer? And is it better to have too few touch points, or is there any problem in having too?
Is there a right or wrong model? The easy answer is the right model is the one that works for you, and it will be very much based on your offer, and the value proposition that you're taking to market, the level of competition in your immediate market, the scale and the reputation of your brand. All of those things come together to determine how much work you have to do to take somebody from having an initial awareness of who you are through being a client. In terms of your other question, too much versus too little, my argument is always the same. Too little is easy to see because you get people coming in, but they never go anywhere because you're not doing enough. And that comes back to the previous episode, right? That whole trust equation is, if I just talk to people once or twice and expect them to jump into bed with essentially £100,000+ contract, you're going to have to do lots of touch points. You're going to have to demonstrate that you're there for the long haul, that you're credible. And that will take effort. It will create touch points. In terms of too much, yeah, absolutely. You can create so many potential touch points that it becomes unmanageable. And if I look at some of the sort of crimes against sales processes, it's the ones where people find themselves accidentally falling into processes and sub-processes, and they just sit there iteratively going backwards and forwards between one lead magnet and one nurturing process and the next lead magnet and another nurturing process. They never actually transition to client because they never get there. So I think that it is possible to do too much. But as for, is there a magic number? I would say the answer is no. There is no magic number.
And for people listening and watching this episode, especially for those who are thinking about making the jump into the fractional world, they're probably listening to this and thinking, I'm in a big corporate company. It's process after process after process. I'm bored by the bureaucracy. I don't want that in my business. When I go solopreneur, I'm going to be, agile and I won't need process. how do you coach those people with that kind of mindset? Because there's kind of that healthy balance between being an agile solopreneur, but also having the right solutions and processes to efficiently manage that client engagement.
I think it comes down to what you're trying to create for yourself. If you want to create a business that behaves with consistency, then process hacking is a big way to do it. And for me, if I look at the technology sector as an example, the conversion rate from first point of contact to client is actually incredibly low. I could speak to 100 people, maybe 200 people, in order to win one big retained client. And with that in mind, if you know that your conversion rate is sitting in the low digit percentages, then to try and orchestrate that without some form of process is a bit of a recipe for disaster. The likelihood is that you're going to miss something somewhere along the way. Just to give you like a crystal clear example, on my fractional consulting side right now, I've probably got somewhere between 50 and 60 open conversation threads taking place via LinkedIn messaging. Now, I built my business on LinkedIn, so I'm perfectly a fan of that model. I'm also very a fan of the fact that LinkedIn's messaging is not the best model. It's quite clunky, it's quite archaic. So if you don't have some form of process there, the risk is that one of those conversations that you invested time nurturing and creating falls through the cracks, and you completely forget about it, and you undo all the trust and credibility that you created in the beginning part of that journey.
As a wannabe fractional looking to come into this world, you have time and you want to use that time as effectively as possible to get yourself up and running and established as a business. How much, if you had like time as 100%, how much percent do you think you should spend building, crafting, ideating this client engagement process? Is it more than half? Is it a quarter?
I don't look at it as a static component, and there's certainly a Ramhart sort of view of the world. When you first start doing this, there are certain things that you're going to want to have in place. So one of the primary reasons that I put the fractional formula together in the first place is I look at this as a big jigsaw puzzle. Most people know intuitively what all of the components are, but they don't know what order they come or how to do certain steps in that journey. And so for me, I say to you, actually, the reason the fractional formula is set at 7 weeks is that's just how long it takes to do everything that's required to go from aspiring fractional consultant to trading fractions. But once you've hit that point, once you've defined your ICP, you're not going to spend an hour a week on it after that. You might come back to it once a quarter and review it as you see fit. Once you've defined your personal brand, again, it might take you 2 or 3 hours to do it in the first instance. If you're good at it, it might take you a day if you've never done it before. Once it's established, you don't have to come back to it. As we move further forward through that sort of journey, creating your first offer, that is hard work. The first time you create an offer document that clearly and concisely demonstrates your value proposition to a potential client and does it in under 2 pages, the first time you do that, that's hard work. But once you've done that, that document is there to be used iteratively and it can be refined on an ongoing basis. So I very much look at that journey as a big lump of work that you need to do to get yourself trading. And then the effort required on that side of the equation drops down. But I guess the real question is how much of your time is spent doing business development activities versus servicing clients. And I would say 30 to 35% of my time is spent doing business development, either with prospect leads and opportunities or with existing clients in terms of making sure that they're happy, making sure that it's working for them, making sure that I'm ticking all the boxes and I'm giving as much value as I possibly could. So 30 somewhere around 35%, I think, is probably an appropriate.
I guess that kind of leads us nicely into the next topic, where I want to explore how marketers or how fractional leaders can effectively leverage negotiation techniques to kind of move the prospect from a prospect to a client. Now, there's probably a bit of a mindset shift here, because for marketers that are in an in-house role, so I've got my tongue twisted there, when they present the corporate brand to the market, if the market doesn't buy that, the marketer still gets their salary at the end of the month, and they adjust some campaigns and they rerun it and they get their salary again the next month, and so on and so forth. When you go from that in-house role to a fractional role, it's a completely different feeling, because you might think you've designed the best engagement process. You might think you've got the best touch points and collateral to support that nurturing process. But what happens when your prospects aren't buying? How do you leverage negotiation to really convince someone to buy your service?
I was in two minds of which way to go at this topic. In the first instance, there's a big headline. You will not win every deal. In fact, you will, in the early days, you'll lose more deals than you win, because you're learning and you're understanding. That's the key point, right? Is win or lose, there is a learning to be had. If you win it, then understand what you did that tick the boxes that push it over the line. If you lose it, then when you go back to that potential prospect and say, when did it go wrong? What would it have taken to win that deal? You have to learn from it and incorporate that into your model. And that's where the agility model really comes into its own. I've certainly had, if I look at my current offer documents for both consulting and coaching, they're probably on versions, 15 and 20, there or thereabouts. All of the modifications are being made because of outcomes. When clients have said to me, "Oh, we actually signed with you because this thing that you said." Well, if I said it and it wasn't in the offer document, then I could shortcut that process by putting it into the offer document. By the same virtue, we didn't go with you because, either you were too expensive or the timing wasn't right or this feature wasn't there. If there are things that I can accommodate, then I'll accommodate them. That's the way that we succeed. So, we'll give you a real world example from that's happening right now for coaching clients. We're in the middle of summer holidays season now. So if people have booked holidays, they know they're coming. And this is a shameless plug from the Fractional Formula side. I make no apology for this. But I changed my standard offer for the cohorts that start in August, so the 1st and the 14th of August. Rather than doing 7 weeks worth of unlimited one-to-one tuition, I extended it to 9 weeks, because mentally that says, well, actually, if you've got a holiday booked in the middle of that, you don't lose out. We can still accommodate you either side of it. It works well. And so that's an example of taking what was an objection. I can't start right now because I've got holiday booked and X, Y, and Z, and actually turning it into a feature of the offer that allows me still to win. And I think that's my view. That's how I would go about things, certainly from a fractional consultant perspective.
Yeah, and I think when you're going into this, my view is when I went into this for the very first time, I didn't know, I didn't have the benefit of speaking to hundreds of clients or prospects to get that immediate feedback on what works well for them, what doesn't. What are the fears, what are the objections, and I think as marketers, any executive coming into this, is you can increase the probability of someone taking the bait by using things like AI to kind of go a little bit deeper into looking at what those potential objections might be. And again, it comes back down to your ICP. If you've got a strong ideal client or customer profile and you've mapped that out, if you go back to that and use things like ChatGPT or other AI solutions, you can actually get a whole long list of those potential objections, So you can sort of hedge your bets quite early on and maybe increase the chances of someone going with you than if you're just starting from your first piece of collateral with no research and just seeing what happens.
In every single episode, at some point, we say the importance of the ICV exercise is profound. And I stand by it. You know, ICV is not about who are they, where are they, what are they. There's so much more to it. If you look at the objection exercise that I take people through, it's not uncommon in the ICV exercise to come up with 30, 40 objections, potential objections that they would have in using a fractional consultant. If you don't have answers for those, then you really are just setting yourself up to fail because you're already forewarned. It's much better to have a possible answer to a piece of situation. So yeah, I think being prepared for the objections is key to being able to deal with them as they happen. And in virtually every engagement, there will be some form of objections somewhere.
And that's probably a nice segue into our final topic, really, where I want to look at the best ways to secure that engagement, that signature on the line. I guess by this stage, you're very close to winning a new piece of business. You've got a good rapport with the prospect. You want them, they want you. It's all exciting. You've done the groundwork. You can imagine the invoice going out every month. You can keep Johnny Rotten in private school for another year, but you still need that signature on your terms of business. So after all that legwork, how do you get the ball over the line, so to speak? How do you close that deal? And is there any follow-up strategy to ensure the long-term client commitment?
There are two different scenarios that I see happen with great regularity. To the extent I coach on both, I don't believe it's one or the other. I think both happen to most of us. The first is what I call direct client. So you are talking directly to the decision maker, to the person that's holding the budget, and the person that has the authority to sign that contract. That for me is the easier model. But if you're talking to them, you've already established a level of credibility and trust, otherwise they would be wasting their time with you. And so really it's about trying to work with them from a position of understanding what their timetable is. And I guess a trick that I picked up from Salesforce themselves, if you listen to how Salesforce account executives operate, they don't close a call without setting a timetable for the next call. And when I first saw that happening, I thought, wow, that's quite pushy, that's quite aggressive. But actually, it's just about maintaining momentum and about keeping both parties accountable for what's going on. From a fractional consulting perspective, there's every possibility that you're going to be running 2 or 3 of these contracts in parallel, and they'll all be going through their negotiation phase, instead closing phase. What you don't want to do is one of them to close and to overlap with one that you're still negotiating, because that would be unfortunate and it's quite political for one part of that. So for me, when I'm working direct with client, I will be looking to set expectations on both sides. What timetable are you working to? When would be appropriate to follow up and to jump on another call? Can we get that in the diary now so that it's flimsy mark? That's great. In terms of the other model is what I call the Trojan horse model. So the person that you're talking to is neither the budget holder nor the final decision maker, but they are an ally. And so if I give an example, certainly from a technology perspective, it's not uncommon for us technology-based consultants to be working with either a CTO or a CIO inside the organization, who then has to go to a CEO or a CFO to get the budget signed off. So when you're dealing with that sort of model, your remit kind of changes. You're there to support them on that journey. And so when I'm coaching people, it's actually about building that one-to-one relationship, saying, look, it's in our best interest that this goes forward. So what do I need to do to support you to make sure that you are credible in asking for approval? And that may be, co-promoting, that may be presenting materials, that may be providing additional verification and validation in forms of social proof. But the two models, they do differ very, very slightly.
I think, certainly any fractional executive really needs to think about, again, who is the buyer? Are they the direct buyer? Are they the ally? What are your tactics to sort of negotiate that sort of closing round, really? So that's probably a good place to close this show. If you've been listening or watching this episode, I hope you find value from the discussion and take what you've learned into the next part of your fractional career. In our next episode, we'll be discussing how you can become an indispensable trusted advisor. So look forward to that one. That'll be out in about a week's time. So Dan, thank you again. It's been a great show. I've really enjoyed it. And I look forward to your company on the next one.
Cheers, Paul. It's been an absolute pleasure. You doing next week?